Welcome to the third instruction movie of week 3 on matrix decomposition conventions in human movement studies. In week 2 you already got acquainted with the yaw, pitch, roll convention. This convention is actually almost never used in motion studies. In this video I will introduce to you the two most common procedures that we do use, the crude and Sentai convention and the global graphic convention. In week 2 you already decomposed an orientation matrix into angles using yaw, pitch and roll. And if all is well, you remember this slide with an overview of possible decomposition orders. But what order do we prefer in human motion? For most human joint angle calculation we use the crude and Sentai convention, named after the two authors who proposed this convention already in 1983. The convention is as follows. The first rotation around the transverse axis of the proximal coordinate system. The second is around the frontal axis of the distal segment. And the third rotation is around the longitudinal axis of the distal segment. In the ISB convention and with our standard axis directions, the crude and Sentai decomposition would be equal to z, x, y order, which have a sine-cosine structure as indicated on the bottom right. This convention is applied to most joints of the human body, but not to the shoulder. If we link the z, x, y rotations to anatomical motion definitions, then the first rotation is around the transverse axis of the proximal coordinate system, which equals flexor extension of the knee. The second rotation is around the frontal axis of the distal segment. This is only equal to adduction of the leg if it's in 0 degrees flexion. In other angles the x-axis has moved out of the frontal plane and is therefore officially anatomically not defined. The third axis is around the longitudinal axis of the distal segment, which more or less equals internal-external rotation. But this only applies if the two coordinate systems for the thigh and shank are aligned in the anatomical position. If this is not the case, all axes will show secondary rotation effect that results from the assumption that the systems are aligned but in fact actually are not. For the shoulder we use the global graphic convention. This convention follows the order: first rotation determines the plane of elevation, the second rotation the elevation of, in this case, the arm, and the third rotation the internal-external rotation. The reasoning for using the global graphic convention for the arm is that with the crude and Sentai convention a 90-degree elevation angle would lead to gimbal lock. In the global graphic convention, gimbal lock occurs when the elevation angle is 0 or 180 degrees, which is either not a very interesting posture or does not realistically happen. Thank you for watching this video in which we briefly discussed the two common decomposition orders in kinematics and their link to anatomical terminology.